Thank you everyone for joining us tonight in our February 2025 installment of our Sheep and Goat webinar series. Tonight we are live from the lambing barn of Dan Persons. Mr. Travis Hoffman is going to lead the way on that, but I just want to make a couple quick introductions. My name is Brenda Miller. I am the Extension Educator in Todd County for Livestock Production Systems. I have some of my colleagues on, Mr. Troy Salzer from up in St. Louis County, Miss Sabrina Florentino, she's on campus. And then we have Sarah Bedker and Rachel Gibbs from our NDSU crew. So with that, we are going to be, and Dan Persons Barn. Dan is from Kensington, Minnesota, which is west central Minnesota. And I will let Travis Hoffman, who is our extension sheep and goats, sheep specialist, but he also helps with goats too, for both NDSU and the University of Minnesota. So Travis, take it away, and we're excited to see what Dan has going on there.
Thanks, Brenda, and thanks everyone for joining us here from rural Kensington, Minnesota, joining us for our webinar. And so we are at Rafter P Ranch, Dan and Kay Persons, and so we'll get their information as well, but I appreciate their efforts in not only having their operation and sharing that time, but also being industry leaders as well. We also have Mr. Brock Erickson that's joined us, and he comes from Stewartville, Minnesota. Okay, so the southeast corner. His family is more accustomed to Dorsets, but he's diversifying as well. And so we will be able to have lots of options for individuals to show some of the things that we have going on for us. But we also have a little bit of information to give a background of our Rafter P operation first off. And one of the things that we're going to do, because we have a lambing demo, is that we have the opportunity, because you never know what's going to happen within our sheep. Brenda, can you confirm, can you see that appropriately?
I can see that, yep.
Okay, I'll put my cursor off to the corner. But we had a ewe that, in fact, just on Monday, that had a leg back, okay, and actually had both legs back. Dan's here with me as well. If I'm correct, we had both legs back. And so only the head was out. We're going to go through this, and it was 10 below zero. So it was a good thing that we were there. But he was able to put one of those front legs out and then keep going with the head and then get this lamb going. And so, Dan, do you have anything that you want to add on this one in particular of our you and our lamb?
Yeah, so that lamb came out and you would have probably thought he was dead. He really didn't want to move at all, and he had a hard time breathing, and so it took a long time to get him to, when I playing with him, he would move, but that's it. He laid flat. Took about probably 5 minutes. We got him kind of so we knew he was going to live, drove to the warm barn with him, and within about 10 minutes, he could lift his head up off the floor at least. And then I went back out and got the ewe later after we knew he was going to be okay. But yeah, that's just what you find once in a while. It's like she shouldn't have lambed there, but she did.
No, so. And we shouldn't have minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. But we do right now. And then also you see he's bedding with primarily corn stalks, but using just some of those small pieces to kind of push at those nostrils and those nose to keep them breathing and let them kind of give some inspiration to it as well. So she's certainly claimed that one. We when she came back, she knew it was hers. But Dan's first and most important thing is making sure that we can get those first couple breaths in it.
Yeah, trying putting straw up the nose, trying to get a reflex of any kind out of that lamb, and just get it to suck in some air and breathe a little bit. And it was a chore. He was a tough one. He probably had his head out for 15-20 minutes by the time we found him. But
So we're here in our little hoop barn. This is our transition barn.
from the lambing barn jugs. The ewes will come into this barn. It's a 40-foot by 40-foot hoop barn with a full hay mow in the top where we store all of our straw, small squares of straw to bed with. We'll put 12 ewes with their lambs in each pen. When they come in, it's 12 ewes plus lambs in a pen, 4 pens. We do 12 per pen because when we go out to our big curtain barn, we want 36 ewes per pen. So we can take 3 pens of 12 and consolidate them together. We use paint colors to designate our different pens. So right now we've got a pen of blue ewes and lambs and 2 pens of purple ewes and lambs. So these blue ones will all get consolidated together when they go to the barn. That way we also know if a lamb gets out of a pen in the curtain barn, if it's got a blue number, we know what pen it has to go into.
In fact, we got to show that live and in person.
They're coming in here at about 24 to 36 hours of age, and they'll stay in here as long as we can. Right now we're lambing pretty heavy, so they might get to stay in here 2 or 3 days, and then they'll have to go out to cold housing. But that 3 days is really important on these very young lambs. It gives them a chance to their body to regulate heat a little bit. It also allows us to see the lambs every day a little closer, and we can watch things better. So if anybody starts to fall behind in this barn, we don't really mess around. If they start going behind, we'll pull the lambs and put them in the bottle pens and raise them on milk replacer. From the milk replacer pens, we can get lists of ewes that donated lambs to the bottle pen, and those ewes, if they only had a single or twins and we had to pull one later, those ewes get marked for cull. They don't have enough milk or enough mothering ability to take care of twins in here. We have walk-through gates everywhere we can, so the alleyway up the center of the barn allows us to go into all 4 pens without going through another pen, and we can move ewes from pen to pen if we have to. But walk-through gates between pens and out of the alleyway for everything. There's no chains, there's no twines, there's no wires to tie gates shut. It's all drop rods and walk-through gates. So fed this barn every day. Usually just 1 bale per pen is enough. Feeding is the most intense in here, or most labor intensive. We use the black tubs that are in the pen. In the morning, we'll drag those outside and we'll drive by with the feed wagon and just fill them up out of the feed wagon outside and then pull the tub into the barn. And they're getting fed. They're essentially getting a late gestation diet yet in here, just as much of it as they want to eat. So pretty well unlimited feed once they lamb. Thanks, Dan. I think we're gonna take you to the bottle barn next.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep, just a second.
It's talking.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're gonna go. The next video is gonna be in our bottle lamb facility, and you'll see how we take care of our bottle lambs.
Joining us now from the bottle barn, Dan Persons.
Whoa, that's impressive. So this is our bottle raising facility. It's an old chicken house from many years ago. We took the floor out of the chicken house and we dug down 12 inches deep and we poured a pit on both sides. So we raise all of our bottle lambs on slats. It's concrete pit, and water goes in and we pump it out with a sewage sump pump in the summer. That 12-inch pit's enough to hold probably 2 to 4 years worth of bottle barn manure, as long as we don't get any water lines breaking or anything. Lambs will come in. Well, behind Travis is kind of our working station. So big hot water heater on the floor. Well, 15 gallon on the hot water heater. And then a box with all of our supplies in it. Another little cabinet with more supplies in it. Got a laundry tub to wash up in. Hot water everywhere. We keep it heated. It's about 50 degrees in here for the winter. And then we've got a lot of fan power. So when it does start to warm up, we can turn fans on. And there's a small fan that's not continuous run when it's this cold, but when it gets up to 20 degrees, it'll run all the time, 24 hours a day. We bring bottle lambs in and they start off in the 3 small pens in the front. We start them off on buckets with nipples. So we can put about 2 quarts of milk in a pail. We use the tan latex nipples. They're a little softer. We actually use some of them that are made for sheep and some that are made for kid goats. And I kind of like the long skinny ones for the kid goats. They seem to play with them a little bit sooner. But we start on buckets with nipples, bring the lambs in, kind of put them up to a nipple, try and get them to have a taste of the milk. And we keep these twice a day. We put warm milk in these buckets. And then twice a day we go up and we try and put the lambs on the nipple. And if we walk in and one is sucking on it by itself, it gets a paint dot on the rear end. So we know when we come in the next time that lamb I don't need to do anything with. He's started already. So we'll watch that way and just kind of observe during the day who's got dots and who doesn't. If they get a dot, then they get moved to a bigger pen. Well, we got 3 pens. Usually it's only 3 to 4 lambs in a pen. My pen 3 right now is kind of full. That's what we brought in today. And some of those got brought in out of the curtain barn because they couldn't keep up with 25 below zero. So they come in from outside. They'll come in, we'll warm them up, we'll tube them with milk replacer and try and get them warmed up so they're active again. And then try and train them back onto a nipple. Heat lamps, but not 200, they're only 125 watts. It's just enough to take the chill off for them. From the little pens, the starter pens, they go into these bigger pens, 15 lambs in a pen with 2 nipples in each pen. So this pen that we're looking at right now, they're about 2.5 weeks old, 2.5 to 3 weeks old. They've lost their tails, so I know they're at least 2 weeks old. If they've got numbers on their back, it means they came off of a ewe that was supposed to be taking care of them. And either the ewe died or she wasn't keeping up with all the lambs that we left on her. We pull all of our ewes down to 2 lambs. So if there's triplets, all those triplets either go on to another ewe or they come into the bottle barn. They get access to creep feed right away. Once they leave the starter pens, they've got access to a ground creep, and it's pretty finely ground. It's a 20% protein. And they also have access to water all the time in these bigger pens. So kind of a homemade water fountain on a float, but they've got access to water all the time as well. And about 15 lambs per pen, 2 nipples, and there's a little fighting goes on over it, but competition sometimes is good in these bottle barns. It keeps them interested in the nipples if somebody else is up there sucking. We got 2 different kinds of flooring. We got orange tenderfoot and it's hog flooring out of nurseries. Really prefer the orange flooring over the black fiberglass flooring. Mostly because the orange flooring stays cleaner. The black the wool tends to stick to it more, and the manure tends to stick to it more. We will wean these bottle lambs at about 30 days of age, and we'll wean them by simply removing the milk from them. We don't do any we don't do any transition to like thin the milk out or feed only a few times a day. We simply pull the milk off, and by the time they're 30 days old, they've been on creep feed the whole time and they've got water in their pens. And a few of them will go backwards, but most of them are going to take right off and keep on eating. And we'll transition these from bottle barn out to bigger barn with straw bedding at that point. We'll probably leave them in here for till they're done bellering after weaning. And then after that, they're out in the bigger barn.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Yep. So now where are we going, Travis?
We're going out to the big barn.
Okay.
One of the things, I guess I'm gonna run this one quick. This one's only 19 seconds. Is because we didn't really show. We're just gonna pan this one across as well. But at the back end, what I didn't show is that we do have the Lactec system here, and so right here is our Lactec, which can change the game, particularly in terms of the numbers of sheep that Dan chooses to have as bottle lambs. So a little bit on the Lactec before we get that question, Dan, and I'll keep transitioning.
Yep. And so we actually run 2 Lactec machines, partly so that we always have a backup. So if one goes bad, we still have the other one we can tap into. But we also do some milk replacer trials where we're looking at different brands of milk replacer, and that way we can split those bottle pens up or the bottle barn up and run trials with different milk, but running through the same type of machine. Big labor saver for us. All we have to do is add powder and keep the tubes clean, which is maybe a 15-minute every other day kind of job.
Okay, and now on February 20th, 2025, it's a little balmy in comparison to the Monday that we chose to film this one in Minnesota.
This is our curtain barn. It's a
welcome
60
curtain
foot
barn
by 300 feet long. Drive-through center alley. It's a 12 foot in the center of the alley, 2 feet for each bunk. So a 16 foot of wasted space, you might say, but it's not wasted at all, because we can feed it by just opening doors and driving through. Cement bunks. Something a little new this year is we put an extra neck rail on each bunk, and we slipped a piece of 6-inch tile tube, dual wall tile tube over the bottom rung. And so far we haven't had any lambs crawling out of the bunk. So that's been a bonus. And yet the sheep can still eat to the back of the cement. The ewes are real willing to stick their heads underneath that tile pipe and eat. So it's kept the lambs in, but the ewes are able to eat through the bunk. We've got 36 ewes in each pen with all their lambs, creep feeder in the center of each pen, and a water fountain that's split between each pen. Lambs in the first pen, the red lambs, they're about 2 weeks old. And then these green ones, they're a little bit younger than that. So here we've got a lamb that is in the wrong pen. He's got blue number on his back, but this is a green pen. So I know that he's crawled through a water fountain or crawled out, crawled back in again. So that's the value of my paint. I really don't care what his number is, but I do like to have the color on it.
And our webinar attendees are impressed with the foreshadowing.
We come through with a bedding blower, usually between 2 and 3 round bales of straw, twice a week, and blow it in the pen. So that's about a half-hour project when we do that. There's creep feeders in each pen, but no creep pen. So these creep feeders work by having this gap here. but the ewe can't get her head into it. So the lamb eat in the back, and they'll reach through and start eating. And but they've worked out really well. We don't have to have creep pens in our barn anymore. Um, when we're done with lambs eating on them as creep feeders, this whole board can pick up in the air and swing up and returns into their finishing feeders. So one feeder does it all. Worked out really good. They hold about 1,000 pounds, and the door just opens and closes. They've been an investment, not a cheap investment, but it's been a good investment to get rid of creep pens. And I firmly believe our lambs are smarter with these feeders. It used to be with creep pens, we had a hard time getting the lambs to leave the pen if we had a creep pen in here. But with these feeders, the lambs run right out the gate with mom. They don't think they need to go hide in their creep pen when we walk in. So that's been good.
We primarily talked to, again, you really like those feeders and what we can do, and then go ahead.
We do like the feeders. The other thing that feeder can do is when if we want to feed ewe lambs and restrict their grain intake, we can put one of those feeders in their pen with ewe lambs replacement females, and by adjusting the feeder, we can get them down to about 1.25 pounds of grain a day and limit their grain intake while we're transitioning them to hay and silage and haylage to grow the ewe lambs out. And now we're gonna take a trip into our working facility, and you can see where we do all of our vaccinating and shearing and sorting and those types of things. So we're out right now at our big hoop barn. This is our working facility. Anytime if we're gonna wean, if we're gonna vaccinate, shearing, all of the sorting of ewes, all of that takes place through this working facility. It's got about a 20-foot long, well, more than that, 25-foot long chute. In the front, we've got an auto drafter, an air-operated auto draft with scales and tag readers that will sort ewes or sort lambs or whatever we want to do. Looks like a building or a room inside, but that's where we can put ewes in at shearing time. We can lock them in there and drop doors on both ends and run heaters underneath to take the frost off of ewes before shearing. It's really basic. It's just wooden chutes, but I think probably one of the most important things if you're going to run any numbers of sheep at all is to have a really good handling facility that works for you. And this one does. We can sort 3 ways. We can sort out the side of the building. We can sort out the front. We can set it up if we want and sort 3 ways inside the building if we get really bad weather. But I don't know, it's just an invaluable space to take. And I like it just dedicated. We are housing our rams in it over the winter, but most of the time this building sits empty, and anytime we want to sort, it's ready to go. So it looks a little dark underneath the covered part, but there is a set of lights back there, and there's fans inside of that room as well to move a lot of air if we need to. We can operate the back gate or the incoming gate to the chute from the front with a rope. So if I'm going to sort fat lambs by myself and maybe bring one of the dogs out to help, we can sort fat lambs pretty fast with just 1 or 2 people and a dog to help move things around. So it's our working facility.
So you could use this on your ewes to make breeding groups, or even if you identified how much by ultrasound pregnancies they were, kind of sort of.
Yep. So when we go into breeding, we use the automatic drafting crate. I set my groups up on the computer of who I want with each ram. We single sire mate all of our ewes are single sire mated. So we will set our breeding groups up on the computer. The computer comes out and runs the scale and the sorting chute. So when it reads the ear tag, it looks at its list and it says, she goes to this ram, sort her to the right. She's with this ram, sort her to the left. And it'll keep track of who it put into each group as it does that. We do not ultrasound our ewes for pregnancy, but we do keep really good breeding records. So when it comes time to load the lambing barn up, I can go right back to my breeding records and say, who did I expose to lamb in the next 2 weeks? And we can pull up that group of ewes, run them through the drafting crate, and it will pull off the ewes that were bred for that 2 week period of time. So we kind of use it in place of ultrasound, and then we'll visually inspect the ewes to see if they're not bagging up at all, they don't go to the lambing barn, but it saves us a step. We can commingle house everything, and then for lambing time, we run them through the chute and it sorts it into whichever. We run 4 different lambing pen or lambing groups, 3 groups of ewes and 1 group of ewe lambs. And that's all stored in the computer, and we let the computer do the sorting. So.
And on feeder lambs, these will get sent through to
all of our feeder lambs, they'll start going through here 2 weeks before weaning. We'll bring them in. They'll go down the chute with their mothers, and we'll do an overeater shot to the lambs. The ewes will get weighed, and the lambs not at that point. At weaning time, then they'll come back down the chute with their moms. The computer will read the tag, and it'll go, oh, she's a ewe. She gets sorted out to the right-hand side. Oh, that's a lamb. It goes to the left-hand side. And it'll record the weights of the ewes and the weights of the lambs at weaning time. And then they'll go into the curtain barn for finishing after weaning. And we'll start sorting those lambs every 2 weeks at about 100 pounds weight. And then they'll start going up and down this chute about every 2 weeks for weights. And we'll just keep pulling off the bigger lambs to go to market.
And your finished weight on the lambs?
Finished weight, we average about 140 on the polypays. 140, yield grade 2 and 3. So no 4s, no 5s.
Right on.
We're right where the sweet spot is. Yep.
All right. Thanks to Dan for the tour there. Just a quick summary, right? We even though we're at the lambing barn now, we went and also caught the hoop barn or the curtain barn and our handling facilities. Let's see here. Okay, my colleagues, if there's any particular questions, can you help us out with those?
Yep, Travis, we have a few here. Just in regards to, first of all, the lactate machine, that's kind of like an automatic milk machine for milk replacer and stuff. So the question was, what brand of milk replacer do you like best?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So I've probably used 6 different brands in the last 3 years. My preference right now, and I'm not done. I've got a new brand I'm using this year. My preference right now is Dinkavit, which is not generally available in this part of the world. I had it brought in from New York when I first started using it. It mixed really, really well. It cleaned up really good in the buckets. It stayed in suspension really good, and the lambs gained really good. But it was only available in New York. So the freight on getting Dinkavit got to be pretty expensive. Right now I'm using Strauss milk, which is a tri-state product. And that's kind of my next favorite at this point. The lambs are doing extremely well on it. Cleanup is easy, and it goes into suspension real well. And I don't want to slam other brands, but I have used some brands that when we mix them with water and let the pail sit overnight, that pail would be like yogurt in the morning. It would just turn to curds and it'd literally be like yogurt by morning. Where we would in a 3-gallon or 4-gallon pail, we might have a gallon of yogurt by morning on the top of that bucket. And that's all waste. So there was a couple brands that happened, and we did some mitigation with it. We found if we added sodium bicarb to that water before we mixed the milk, that we'd get rid of the yogurt formation. But you know, milk replacers, I think lambs will do good on any brand milk replacer. Some are more forgiving to human error than others. And I think that's the big difference. If you are maintain high sanitary standards in your bottle barn and keep everything really clean and you mix the milk properly, like, which means it has to be the formulation that's on the bag has to be followed. If it says 4 ounces of milk, that's not 4 1/4 ounces of powder, it's 4 ounces of powder. And if they say the water temperature needs to be 110 degrees to mix, it needs to be at least 110 degrees to mix. If you try to mix it in cold water, that fat will not dissolve in the milk the way it's supposed to. And if you use too hot of water, you'll destroy the proteins. So what they say on the bag is what you got to follow. But sanitation in the bottle facility is just #1 priority. Stuff's got to stay clean. That means cleaning buckets every day, cleaning milk machine at least every other day to run water through the lines, clean the bowl out. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It just needs to be done. The advantage of the milk machine is all we really do on a daily basis is add powder. And that, you know, I'm adding powder to water if I was doing buckets too, but I can add 25 pounds of powder in 30 seconds and I can walk away. So it allows me to do other things. But what milk replacer is best? I think they all will raise really good lambs, but make sure it's lamb milk replacer, not dairy calf milk replacer.
A question on a similar line there is just how long, and you keep them on there for 30 days, and that gives them enough of a head start that their body and their ruminant can be that at least they can switch a little bit to some feeds at that point too.
Well, at 30 days of age, they're already eating creep feed. They're eating about 1/10 of a pound a day of creep feed at 30 days. And they're drinking water already at 30 days. So, and they're weighing upwards of 30 pounds at that point. They're weighing upwards of 30 pounds already at that 30 days of age. So I'm really not concerned at all about weaning them off at 30 days. The longer you leave them on, so they'll drink as much the second week of their life as they did they'll drink as much in the second week as how should I say this? In the second week, they will drink twice as much as they drank in week 1. The third week, they will drink the equivalent of what they drank in week 1 and in week 2. By the 4th week, they're drinking as much milk as they did in weeks 1, 2, and 3 combined. So by the time they hit that 4th week, they will drink you out of house and home. And milk replacers probably the most expensive feed you're going to feed on the farm. So the quicker you can get them off of it, the better off you're going to be. And 30 days seems to be just fine. A couple might go backwards, but most of them will pick right up and start eating feed, and they will survive at that point.
Dan, from a topic standpoint, we have a colostrum, we have gates and panels, and we have equipment that you use to identify those. And we're going to do those live from the lambing barn. Okay. Yes. So we are right in front of it here, but we'll move to those. And as those topics come up, we can talk about that because we'll move to the middle of our table of the barn.
Remember to talk about the colostrum.
Yep. Go ahead on the colostrum as we kind of walk over there, and so Brock and I'll help Vanna White
store colostrum. We do we do store some colostrum. We freeze some colostrum, but most of what we have frozen is dairy cow colostrum. We generally don't milk out a ewe and save her colostrum for anything. These ewes are having twins and triplets, and I don't want to take milk away from twins and triplets that are on a ewe. So we generally won't rob from Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. We will use dairy colostrum. If we get in a really big pinch, I'm not afraid to give that lamb a shot of antibiotic and put them right on the milk replacer. Skip the colostrum. But it'll take them, they need that antibiotics to get their system over those first few weeks before they can be immune to anything. So it's not a practice I would recommend, but if push comes to shove and there's no colostrum, you can make lambs stay alive. So we're going to look at the tools of our trade here that I've put on the table. We'll start off with kind of the milk replacer kind of stuff. So a bottle, and we don't use Pritchard teats or anything. This is the same nipple that is on our milk machine system. So it's just a Premier style tit, and we slip it onto the bottle. And I hate these new pop bottles that don't have any plastic in them, but water bottles. But that's all we use. And we don't do this very often. It's once in a great while we'll actually truly bottle feed a lamb. Most of the time we don't have time to do that.
Not everybody's living the blessed life that you are, though. So thanks for showing it.
Most lambs,
what us common folk do.
Yeah, most lambs don't want to live here.
Yeah.
So then the units we use in our milk barn, both look like Premier teats. This is a common one that would be mounted in the bottom of a bucket. It's just the gray teat body, 2-part body that comes apart, and the nipple that's inside of it. That's kind of the common one that everybody sees. The newer one that's out has they call it the bayonet style. And so on the end of that gray nipple, there's a stainless steel tube. And on the end, and then on this tube is my milk line that comes from the milk machine. We find these to be much better units. And you can use this same unit and draw off of out of a 5-gallon bucket if you want. So you can have a tube going off the bayonet down into a pail on the floor and just let them suck through that nipple. And they work really nice. That's kind of my go-to right now, is this style of gray Premier teat. So in the lambing barn itself, a few tools. We don't use them very often, but we've got a head snare. And so it's a steel cable inside of a plastic Y. And when you pull on the other end of it, it's like a noose and it shortens up. It allows you, if you have to open the loop up, reach inside the ewe, put the head of the lamb into the noose, and then pull the head out, tighten the noose up around the back of the head, and be able to pull that head out through the birth canal. Very rare do we need to use it, but it's a great tool in some of those lambs where the head is back or it's buried too deep and you just can't get a grip on it. This will help. And then we have a leg snare that's really just a rubber piece of twine, right? It's a noose on both ends. And use it if I've got 2 feet sticking out and I need to push those feet back into the ewe to do some more work. I can put this snare on the feet and it's got some little knobs so I can tighten it up. And then I can push those feet back inside the ewe and work on trying to get ahead. And yet I still got a hold of the feet without my hand being in there to do it. So kind of a cheap little item. It might get used twice a year or maybe 3 times a year. Pretty rare we need to use it.
But valuable when you need it.
Valuable when you need it. And it doesn't cost much. I think this is probably 10 years old. Take good care of it. So that's the 2 OB obstetrician tools we use. We do use harnesses sometimes. a lot of the ewes, like in the first video we saw, a lot of my ewes, I don't need to put a harness on them to pull lambs. I can go in the pen, I can lay her down, I can hold her on the floor and pull the lambs without harnessing her. I like this style versus a rope harness. It's a nylon web, adjustable. I just like this style better. And then it's got a carabiner hook on the end. So I don't have to tie it onto a jug. I can just snap it on the fence and use it. So you need a halter of some kind. I don't care what kind, just get one that you like. You know, they last forever.
Yeah, because that one's old, I guarantee it.
This one is very old.
Yeah, when I got to use it in the, in the 80s and 90s, it was old then.
Bought it
so
from your grandpa.
there you probably did.
Another item you need to have in your box is an S-curve needle and some umbilical tape, 3/8 inch wide umbilical tape. So you can do yourself a favor as well with these S-curve needles and keep them really sharp. Sometimes they come from the factory and that point isn't very good. So sharpen them up on a stone so that they actually work for you. And 3/8 inch tape is cheap. Don't be afraid to, this is kind of a short piece, but use what you need to use. I don't even mind having a big string hanging out behind her because I can find her again easy. But use these to sew up prolapses, both vaginal prolapses and uterine prolapses. Is the S-curve needle is useful for that.
And like you said, it's certainly just fine to have enough of the string behind you, because if you don't and
if you're short of string, it's just annoying.
Then it's a tougher deal.
It's annoying.
Yeah.
If we do have vaginal prolapses before lambing, we use spoons. And if you haven't used one, we don't use harnesses. We use this spoon. We do not sew the vulva shut. We insert the spoon and then we take one string and we tie it. We put a stitch through her hide right above her tail, and we tie the center of the spoon to that loop on her backbone above her tail. And then the two side wings get stitched right to her flanks, or not to her flanks. They get stitched to the skin on her hind legs, and that holds the spoon in. And usually they can push their water bag out, and they can usually even lamb through these spoons. So we don't have to be there to cut the strings on a sewn up ewe. They can usually get stuff out around the spoon. But so that's our extra stuff, and it really doesn't amount to very much. It's just kind of normal supplies. And it, in addition to this, there'd be OB lube. You need to have a lubricant of some kind, but that's good.
And Dan, for a sweet shout out, we just did a month ago, we did a lambing kits webinar. Mr. Troy Salzer helped to lead that. And so for those of you that wish to go to our University of Minnesota Sheep and Goat team site on YouTube, that will soon be available as well. So we're way past that. We're on step 2 now already, man.
That was a shameless advertisement.
No thanks. Yeah, well.
I think we should go and do a few ewes and lambs.
Yep.
And do that. So we're going to go over and tag some lambs, and we'll just show you my tagging box. Got an elastrator tool, a little cup of elastrator bands, spray paint, some eye clips, and the tool to put the eye clips in with, and then an ear tagger and a handheld computer to scan the tags. So we're going to go over to a ewe and we'll band the lambs and work them over, and I'll show you how we do our processing, and maybe we'll do a couple of different ewes just so we can see it all.
All right, sounds good.
And you guys can be the talker. So lambing jugs. So this ability to just walk in a jug without having to climb over has been just huge for us. This is one of those investments that after we did it, we said, why did we wait so long? Because we can go in and out, and there's no twines, there's no chains, there's nothing to hold this gate shut other than a couple little clips on the bottom. And we really don't have ewes get out, except now tonight she'll probably blow through the gate, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm gonna pick up my lamb. I'm gonna look at it quick, see that it's a boy. So I know I'm gonna band it. And everybody's got their own process, but this is mine. My left leg goes up on the gate and the lamb sits here on my knee, ready for me to work. It's kind of like shearing. If you hold them right, there's generally not much squealing or jumping around that's done. I start with the testicles. So lamb sitting, I reach between the legs with my elastrator band. I give a little tug on just a little tug on the scrotum to lift that scrotum up, and I'll close the band. Then I'll count 1, 2, uno, dos. 2 testicles. Got to have 2 of them.
And count it twice too.
Yep.
One
And
in
then-
English, one in Spanish.
And then pull the bander off, and it leaves that band right at the base of the scrotum, not including you'll see the little nipples on the boys, and you don't need to go so deep that those nipples are inside the band. So stuff goes pretty quick. So that's his testicles. The tail, I put my band on, I go in, and I leave about 2 fingers between the back of the lamb and my band. And then pull the band, the applicator off, and the tail is done. So about like that. If you look at it, that 2 fingers is right at the end of that caudal fold. And if you go deeper than that, you're going to have more problems with prolapses. We had about 800 lambs we fed out last year that we processed ourselves. And I think I had 1 rectal prolapse on 800 lambs. And that's pretty darn good. So that's the 2 bands. Now we're going to tag this lamb. This is new Shearwell product, like brand new, just getting shipped into the US this week, but it's the Speedy Tagger. So it has a cartridge with 10 tags in it. I push it on my knee and it loads an ear tag into the end of the applicator.
Holy moly.
So there it loaded an ear tag. I can go up to my lamb, put the tag in, and as I squeezed it and let go, it advanced itself to the next tag, and it's ready to go for the next lamb. So this lamb is done. This is the first one in my orange group, so it's going to get a 1 on his back. And this lamb is done. Go to the second one. So a girl. So we'll do her tail first. Then a couple fingers. Pull the band off. No tag yet. Hit it on my knee and I've got a tag ready to go. And we put the tag in, top of the ear, kind of close to the head, with a little bit of room for that ear to grow in the end of that tag. If you don't do that, the ear will grow and it'll irritate that ear. Now this lamb has got inverted eyelids. And if you've never seen them, I knew right away because his face is all wet. So this isn't manure, this is cry. He's been crying for 2 days, well, a day. He was born yesterday, but he's been crying. And so if you've never seen it, I don't know if we can get a picture of that, Travis, but. So if you look at him, his bottom eyelid is inside out and needs to be rolled out so that it's not irritating his eyeball anymore. And so now I rolled it out and it lays flat on his eye now, but I got to fix it because if we don't fix it, it'll be right flipped inside out again within a short period of time. And I use eye clips to fix inverted eyes. Maybe we can, I don't know.
Oh, here we can show.
Show. It's a little stainless steel clip in a special pliers. And if you're trying to use these pliers and you're frustrated because you keep dropping the little eye clip in the straw, take an elastrator band and put an elastrator band on your applicator tool. And it will negate the spring that's in that thing. So now it won't drop that eye clip.
Okay.
And they're 38 cents a piece. So you don't want to drop too many of them on the barn floor.
Jeez.
So we're going to put a clip in this lamb. He's not very cooperative, so we'll see how this goes. But I'm going to pull the eyelid down. I'm going to push this clip, push the clip into his bottom eyelid and squeeze it together. And if you can see now, he's got a little tiny eye clip there, and it has a fold of skin pinched in between it. He's really hairy and hard to see, but you can see that it's kind of tented that skin out around his eyeball, and that'll stay for 3 or 4 days. He'll have that little tent of skin, and that's enough that it will puff up, get a little swollen, and then the eyelid will stay out where it belongs. So we're going to do the other side too. He is just a fighter. She is. And I like to dry him off because he is all wet. I'm going to pull the eyelid down, push in with my,
But it's something, Dan, that's got to be addressed because it
you
doesn't
got
get
to
better.
do it. It does not fix itself.
And part of the reason that we're doing this, is still for the welfare of that animal so that they can feel better because we can. This is one of our chances to fix something.
They will die if you don't fix it. It's so painful that a little lamb, this one's a nice strong lamb, but
yeah, big
if
ewe
it's
lamb.
A little bit weak, it's so painful they will just not get up and eat. They'll starve themselves because it's so painful. So again, a 1 on her back.
A question comes up of, do you cull the ewes because of that? One of the things that's important as we think about it from inverted eyelids is that it is pretty highly genetic. But that could be from ram side or ewe side. We don't particularly know, but what's your thoughts? Or is it one strike against them and then we got to worry about something later? It's
maybe a strike against her, but I think a lot of the inverted eyelids are due to trauma.
Sure.
When that lamb's being born, big lambs and maybe not that big of a ewe, and it's just, I think a lot of it's trauma on the eyes, but I don't generally call for it.
Well, and it's managed. That one's going to be just fine. It'll be improved here quickly. And this ewe is going to raise 2 thriving twins, and so she's doing her job.
She's doing her job, and it's, I can't afford to replace her over a 38-cent eye clip.
That's a fair assessment.
So I'm going to record this ewe now in my records. So I'm going to read her ear tag. I beeped her ear tag in, and right away my computer told me that she was bred to a Hugadorn ram. And so I'll press add a lamb to her record. Catch that lamb. And that's the female.
That's the ewe.
So press ewe lamb, give it a weight, and tell it to add another lamb. Beep the second lamb in, and that was a wether. And give that one a weight.
Well, now he was a ram this afternoon, but
yeah, well, luck of the draw. And so that record keeping is done on this ewe.
Let's look at that.
We're not going to get the glare is not going to be our friend. Yeah, so it's telling us what the ewe's number is, who the sire is of the lambs being born today, and that was all stored in the computer's memory. Says she's had 2 live lambs and 0 dead lambs born today, and it's ready for me to move on to the next ewe. So record keeping goes pretty quickly. If I wanted to put a comment on her, we could do that too.
Who's the manufacturer? Where'd you get the ideas on these gates?
These gates were drawn up at a Minnesota Lamb and Wool Producers Annual Convention.
Okay.
On a napkin between Al Hendricks and myself.
Okay.
Runs Bear Creek. He runs Bear Creek Welding Industries in Minnesota here, and he made all my lambing pen fronts for me.
All right.
The very first one he ever built is in the next jug over. That was our prototype, and we've kind of refined it from there, but they've been just a tremendous help. You'll see them all around the barn. We use them as gates between drop pens. We're gonna do one more view here. So we got another boy. Give the scrotum a tug, count testicles, and that's done. So this generally doesn't take very long to do processing. The tail, get it in, down about 2 fingers from the rear of the lamb and pull the bander off. While I'm doing this, I'm feeling his face, and I know that he's got a dry face, so his eyes are good. And this is ewe number 2.
What size are these jugs?
They are about 4.5 by 4.5. The wire mesh panel gates in the middle, dividing the ewes, they were made by Hoffman blacksmith shop. He made a jig for me and bent the tubing and welded the panels in. It's all drop rods. Her face is dry as well, so good on her.
We're also, for those of you interesting, again, polypay based ewe flock. I know that even Dana was talking of lambs that are born or dropped. We're over 200%. So about 220.
About 220 right now.
Yep.
One thing I should mention it. We tag 1 time a day. I'll go through usually before dinner. Every day I go through and we tag our ewes that were lambed the previous day. We keep track of that by at night before I bring the drop ewes into the barn, because they have to go outside to eat. Before we bring our drop ewes in, I'll go through the barn and I'll put dots on the ewes that are in the jug. So she has 2 dots on her back. That means I know that she lambed yesterday and she had 2 lambs and she dropped 2 lambs in the pen. So that's my signal that she's going to get tagged today. And generally we tag her before dinner, and then about 3 in the afternoon, anything that was tagged in the morning gets moved out to the family barn, to the hoop barn.
You just take them to that barn as lambs under your arm?
No, we've got a little garden wagon with high sides on it, and we can load lambs from 6 or 7 ewes lambs can fit. So like 14 lambs can fit in that little trailer. And we'll pull the trailer into the barn, fill it with lambs, and then pull the trailer around to the little hoop barn and let the ewes follow. So it goes pretty fast, usually 2 or 3 trips and we've got lambs moved. So
an inquiry while you're still in the pen, all right, it says you didn't give any shots at this point during the process. What and why?
Okay, so nope, no shots. Our lambs don't see our ewes got an overeaters booster shot before lambing. So right after we sheared, we went through and we boosted all of our ewes for C&D vaccine, or for C&D. We don't vaccinate for tetanus. Lambs' immune systems, when they are this young, is not functioning. So to vaccinate a lamb at birth doesn't do anything. You could just well squirt it on the floor. So we will not vaccinate these lambs until about 2 weeks before we're going to wean. That they will see their first C&D shot at that time. Prior to that, they need to get their C&D coverage from mother's milk, and that will come through the colostrum and it'll come through her milk. So vaccinate the ewes. Don't worry about the lambs. They're not going to get overeaters nursing on their mom. That comes later. So generally don't give any other shots. We don't give lamb baby lamb strength. We don't give tetanus. We don't give any routine vaccination or routine antibiotics in the jugs at all. It's just let mom deal with it. We treat lambs only if they need to be treated. We're on an antibiotic-free program, so we try to limit as much as we can our use of antibiotics.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just a little bit of a highlight that's farther along the line here is that these are lambs that stay in the system through Superior Farms. And so those, if they can make it into an antibiotic-free program, if they are not provided that an antibiotic along the way and appropriate documentation exists.
Yep. Anytime we have to give an antibiotic of any kind to these lambs, we record it on our computer. So every treatment we make, we record that treatment. It tracks our withdrawal dates for us, so we don't send ewes to market if they still got drugs in their system. But it also allows us to go through and we market our fat lambs and pull off or mark lambs that have had antibiotics. And we get a premium for those antibiotic-free lambs, so we have to put a little effort into it to make that happen.
So your breeding program, you touched on a little bit, at least in our discussion, but you have 4 different groups, and so they start, and then 2 weeks later they start, and so tell a little bit about that. And
yeah, so our lambing barn, as you can kind of see around, we're not very big. This facility is not that big, so we cannot hold. At one point, we had 1,100 ewes, and we ran them all through this lambing barn. And obviously, they aren't all going to fit in here at once. Now we're down to about 380 ewes, but we will expose 150 ewes for 2 weeks. And then we'll turn around and at 2 weeks, we'll bring another 100 ewes in and expose a new group of 100 ewes and keep the first group still breeding, but bring another 100 ewes into the mix. And then 2 weeks later, another 100 ewes, and we just keep adding ewes to the mix. So about every 2 weeks, there's a whole nother group of ewes that are ready to come through the lambing barn. So right now we're on our second group. We're about halfway through the second group of ewes at this point.
And you also do your best in terms of keeping breeding dates. So we have a pretty good idea, you said.
Yeah, we have a pretty good idea. Well, I know exactly when I turned rams in with everybody. And so that tells me an expected due date, not a for sure due date, but an expected first possible due date. And so we can sort those first group ewes out. Then we'll just visually look at them and try and visually look and see, you know, is she going to lamb in the next 2 weeks or is she farther off? And it's a guessing game. We're wrong sometimes. We've sometimes got ewes out in the curtain barn that are lambing where they're not supposed to, but for the most part, we can bring our ewes in, and we've done it enough years now that we kind of know what to expect. If we expose 150 ewes, we know we're going to get about 100 of those to lamb out in the first 18 days. I mean, it's almost like clockwork at this point. We single sire mate everything. So the wild card is if we get a ram that's no good, we could get flooded with ewes in a different time period. But so far we've been okay. We haven't had any rams that have not worked for us. We're about a 98% conception rate on our old ewes.
Wow. And
then the ewe lambs run about a 90% conception rate. So,
and those are ewes that are bred at 7-8 months of age.
Ewe lambs are bred at 8 months to lamb at 13 months of age.
Okay, outstanding. And all of those lambs, or even with 98% of your old ewe crop coming bred, we keep everything in the spring here. You don't.
I do not do any
lamb
fall.
any in the other times of the year, right?
We do not anymore.
No. The inquiry comes from our attendees on the beautiful teal PVC pipe.
Yes.
So people didn't know what it was, but we got a source.
So that's our water tube for our ewes. It's a sewer pipe, so it's a 6-inch sewer pipe with a hole cut in it, a hole opening in each of the lambing jugs. And then there's a float inside the tube, so it stays full. And it gives water access to all of the lambing jugs. And at night we'll leave, like you can see the next ewe over, she's laying in an open jug. At night, when we have drop ewes in here, any jug that's not occupied by a ewe with lambs, we'll leave that gate open. And we'll have a considerable number of ewes that will lamb in an open jug in the middle of the night. And in the morning, all we have to do is walk over and shut the door, shut the gate. And it really does work. There's enough stink in these pens that they want to lamb where everybody else is lambing. And so they pick their spots and they'll lamb in a jug. So in fact, the quads that are down the way, about 4 ewes down, there's a set of quads that were born right before the webinar started. And she had locked herself in the jug before she started lambing. There was no water bag out, but she'd locked herself in that jug, and that was going to be her spot. So.
Well, good. That's making sheep operations easy there.
A lot easier. Yep. Yep. We should demonstrate tubing a lamb.
Yep.
That's kind of next on our meal. We've got a couple of little lambs that were born. They were born late last night, and they're really tiny.
The information came up there from our crew of who did make these. Again, just a reinforcement. That's Mr. Al Hendricks, who's a sheep producer and talented person, welder to put all this together, and he's here in Minnesota.
So we've got a couple of little lambs that they're really tiny, born last night. They've had colostrum once already. We use just a water cooler full of hot water, and then we'll put in this case, it's milk replacer milk, but we'll stick that down inside the cooler full of hot water, and it keeps it warm. So if we want to walk around and tube some other lambs in a barn, we can do that. We'll try and demo this. So here's my technique, and I put the lamb between my legs and hold him with my knees, and then tip the head back, and I put a finger on each side of the throat. So 2 fingers, one on each side of the windpipe is what you'll feel in there. Finger on each side, and then start putting the tube down. And as it goes down, I can feel it going past my fingers. And generally, if you've got that tube in all the way like this, you're not in the lungs.
That's right.
You are way past, this tube's all the way back down here by his belly button. So you're not in the lungs at that point. That was a good sign. He squeezed himself and milk came up the tube.
There you go.
That means he's got milk in his belly yet. So I'm not going to give him very much. We're going to give him just like maybe 3 ounces, enough to sustain him for the night. Put my cap back on so it doesn't spill. And then just hold it there until it naturally drains. Don't force it. Watch it go down. Give it plenty of time. And before you pull the tube all the way out of him, pinch the tube off with your fingers and then pull the tube out. And you can see that tube's pretty long. When it was in there, it was down in his belly. So you know you're not in the lungs at that point. We'll do her other one here too.
And something always to be, careful of, as he described it, because if we get it in the lugs, it's not going to turn out good for anybody's day, including the lambs. All right. And so, but it just takes a little bit of practice.
Take some practice, and you can feel that tube if you you pass through pretty slow, you can feel it go past. And actually on this one, it's on this side and it's not going to cooperate very well. But on some lambs, you can actually see the tube go down through that esophagus. If you can't feel or see the tube, it's because you're in the windpipe. And windpipes are hard, solid tubes, and you can't feel anything go down those. But the esophagus is just a flap of skin almost. It's just a skin organ that goes down. So we're going to give this one a little shot of replacer too. I think they're both drinking on mom a little bit, but she's not super stellar, and these lambs are not super great either, but we're going to let it go down and they're going to be just fine in the morning. He's kicking a little bit, and that's normal. I'd kick too. So,
but the flow was good on that.
Flow went down fast. His belly got big. So I know that milk went down in his tummy. And again, if it started at his head, the end of that tube's down here. If you're in the lungs, you're only going to get it in about halfway and you'll bottom out in the lungs. So kind of pays to know anatomy a little bit. But those two lambs are pretty tiny, but they're going to live.
They're going to be fine. Yep. And they'll be up and show some vigor. You know, those first days, and in fact, no matter what you do with your operation, some are going to be thriving and some of them are going to need some assistance. I talked, you know, with my colleague as well. So my colleague at our Hettinger Research Extension Center, Dave Pearson, it was minus 45 there a couple nights, and that's without the wind in Hettinger, America. And so, you know, and we're lambing there as well. A couple things that he even brought, you know, if this was the case of ones that were behind, was to keep just a little bit in their belly, okay? Because we don't want, you know, the common thing is once you put the tube in, is you feel, okay, I got to fill them up, and that just makes them a little bit lethargic, makes them a little bit more challenging. It doesn't really help us. And so his thoughts, even from some of those that are behind, or trying to get them, you know, back to warm, is just a little bit of electrolytes, a little bit of dextrose, okay, or some sugars that help, you know, and about an ounce of each of those, and just an ounce or so of some milk to get that into the belly. And so those people that want to kind of dig and say, okay, I need to get the colostrum into them or get the milk into them, just take it just a smidge slower and get some of that those sugars in the belly and that moving, because the body, even when you do get some of that colostrum, the uptake doesn't really help you, as you talked about it, in terms of just, you know, vaccines and animal health as well, is that we got to get those lambs, you know, just on the right track and thriving. Dan, isn't that appropriate?
That's appropriate, and anything you can do to reduce the stress and not add more stress to their life is beneficial. So, you know, and that idea of just adding a little bit of milk to their tummy when, you know, they're out in a cold barn or something and they just need a little extra shot. A couple ounces of warm milk is sometimes that's all it takes to wake them up in the morning and make them go find mom, because she has milk. They just need to get motivated to go get it. So it's been a little bit more brisk than preferred, but an inquiry came. Sorry, I said that in jest. So appreciate the efforts, but an inquiry came in and said, what is the temperatures in your barns and what do you try to keep it at? Okay. You know, so this barn right now, we have a thermometer on the wall. Oh yeah, we have proof. And it says it's 45 degrees in here right now. That's at about 5 foot of height. At floor level, it's probably closer to 35 or 40 on the floor. And that's where we keep it. So in this room, there's a fan behind us that runs continuously at kind of a slow speed. It's moving and it's taking air out, but it's not like pumping air through the building. In the other room, there's a fan just like it, same size, pretty good size units. That fan is also on a minimum speed flow right now, but it has a temperature control on it. So if the barn starts to get too warm, that fan starts to run faster. So right now, my minimum speed is up to 50 degrees. If it gets over 50 degrees, that fan in the other room kicks in faster and harder. And it will suck air in out of the boxes that are on the ceiling, are our fresh air intakes. So there's 6 intakes in this room and 3 in the other room, or 2 in the other room. And cold air will come in out of the attic to come into the building. But we try to keep this room at about 50 degrees, and it's pretty consistent. We do have a heater, so as we shrink in U numbers and get fewer and fewer U's in here, the heater once in a while will still have to kick in. With 100 U's, the heater generally won't run unless it's 20 below zero outside. But
And this is about the number of U's that you would have in here at any
100
general
is
time.
kind of
100,
the most
yep.
for this.
That's
Over
why you
100
space
gets
it out a
really
little bit
crowded.
in terms of the breeding.
Yeah, over 100 U's, this gets really crowded. We do have in our little hoop barn that where we had our families at to begin with, we do use that for overflow lambing if we need to. So we've lambed out using that building as well, and it works, but it's kind of means that one we have to carry water in every day, and we have to carry pails of feed into another building. So we try to keep the lambing use just in this building.
Well, another thing to keep into consideration is as those see this group of ewes that are nearing their parturition time, is that they are pretty close shorn. Okay, and so we can be limited based on the number of ewes that we could fit in this building or any of our lambing barns if we were behind and didn't get them shorn.
Yep.
Because and in fact that will cause a lot more humidity, right, and moisture in here, and so getting those shorn is certainly something that we want to do. A couple different things. Obviously, it keeps that underline and that udder and that teat a little bit more open, so that those lambs can find the teat first off and be more productive. And it just helps us from a management standpoint in here. So if we're at February 20. Did you aim for first of the year, or how much you got regrowth on these girls?
We sheared these right before Christmas.
Okay.
So
I was close, missed by a week.
20th of December we sheared, and they started lambing the 1st of February.
Okay.
So about 40 days prior to lambing, they got sheared. There's a few in here with wool on their backs. When we sheared those ewes, they were in not very good condition. And so if they were thin and not looking very good, we did not shear those in December. We left their wool on to get through the winter.
Okay. And then on feeds, particularly as they're getting closer, maybe Brock wants it, right? We made it a long way. We made it an hour and 18 minutes without talking about feed. So just from a nutrition standpoint of our late gestation ewe, and then if anything changes as we move along the way.
Okay, so these ewes are, all of our feeding is done with a TMR wagon, a total mixed ration out of a feed wagon. I've got a pail here and we'll show what their diet looks like. Hand off to my bride. My wife, Kay, she pretty well manages the bottle barn. And then she also does all of our, we call it night checking, but it's really evening checking because we don't go out at night. She'll check the barns about 9 o'clock at night. Between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock, she'll come out to the lambing barn, walk through it, go to the bottle barn, make sure that looks okay. And then the door gets closed and nobody comes in here till 8 in the morning. That's just us. Nobody's going to freeze in this barn, so I don't worry about that. The worst that can happen is maybe somebody will get mismothered, but we do as much mismothering as they do, so I think it's all good.
Well, that's just the challenge of having a high birth crop, right?
High crop.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. So thanks. Yes, we are at Rafter P Ranch, and it is Dan and Kay. Okay, and maybe it should be Kay and Dan. All right, he just gets to be at the table
banker
as well. So, the banker.
She's my banker.
I'm sure she's lots of things for the infrastructure of it. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And while we're doing that, okay, you can give your quick introduction.
Yeah, I'm Brock Erickson. Travis mentioned I'm from Stewartville, Minnesota. My family down there, we've got about 80 head, primarily Dorset ewes. We're selling mainly breeding stock, and as some would say, some show stocks to some local 4-Hers. So obviously, it's not a full-time thing for us. Some would say it's maybe a hobby gone wrong, but no, it's still enjoyable, and we're still doing the same things. And I know we were talking about some feed, and I can kind of share what we do for our late gestation as we kind of move into lambing season and what we kind of look for with the ewes. For us, we start lambing a little bit earlier, right around Christmas, right at the first of the year is when we'll get, really into lambing. As soon as we take corn off the field, we'll use some corn stalks and we'll feed some free choice hay, and that kind of happens that mid-fall. We'll try to shear around Thanksgiving, a little bit before usually is when we do that. And at that point is when we're going to start taking a peek as condition score on the ewes and probably start supplementing some grain in there. And when we do that, it's a corn protein mix that we're doing. We're trying to get about a 14% ration. Obviously, dependent on the ewes' body condition scores, typically find ourselves feeding anywhere from half a pound to a pound and a half at that time. Sometimes I do have the availability to potentially split those groups if I feel necessary. I want to add some condition to a certain few. Very rarely we do that, but with our facilities, we can do that. At that point, now we're going to be moving into, we're going to feed some big squares of hay. For us, that is 2/3 alfalfa, 1/3 grass. That's fed dry. Our biggest thing there is I try to put those feeders about 100 to 150 yards away from where we grain the ewes, just to make sure the exercise stays, the ewes are thriving there with the additional exercise. So I try to get that from where they are eating the hay to where we grain them. They got some walking distance to keep them in shape. And as we get closer to the year, obviously condition scores, and when we're here in Minnesota, a lot of it plays into the weather and how we want them looking. So we kind of continue that same ration until lambing period, and that's kind of how it works for our operation. And I guess not being the size and scale, we don't have access to TMRs, so it's corn protein and some forages. For us, it's mainly grass alfalfa mix that we use, and that works for our situation.
Absolutely. And as Brock and I were talking about this initially, well, it's just, the grass and alfalfa hay and corn or grains that are available. And so, but that's where a lot of people are. In fact, if that's the case, or some might choose to add in some oats as well, where they want to be, and we can increase the protein if we so aspire with some of the protein pellets. I know that Dan talked a little bit that maybe even his, at least at some point along the line, is a little higher in the protein. But we'll look at the total mixed ration that you've got here.
So this is what our ewes are eating right now in the lambing barn. It's a mixture of 1 pound of ground alfalfa, a pound and a half of corn, a pound of corn silage, and 4 pounds of haylage, alfalfa haylage. Moisture wise, it's probably about a 40% moisture diet with just little corn in it. It's got a wonderful smell and just enough moisture that it's palatable to them. Ends up to be about a pound of protein per head per day, and about 4 to 4 1/4 pounds of TDN for energy. And they will clean it up. It's pretty high quality, so the bunks are slicked by the next morning. We do the same exact diet for our lactation diet, except it's 1.25 more of every ingredient. So 125% more for every ewe that's lactating. Keeps our ration really simple. We can mix one big batch in our feed wagon, and if we're going to feed 8 pounds to one ewe in a late gestation, that will feed 10 pounds per ewe in lactation. And we end up meeting the nutrient requirements on both levels with mixing one batch of feed. So it makes our feeding a lot easier. Much like Brock, it's what we had available.
Sure.
We really don't buy anything special to put in our lactation or our late gestation. The only thing we'll buy on these is we do occasionally run tetracycline crumbles through our lactating ewes or our gestating ewes for chlamydia control. But that's only if we start having issues. Again, we try to limit antibiotic use as much as we can.
And that can and could be a whole different section. I mean, we aimed for today's at lambing, but that one could have been, more in terms of pre-lambing. But one of the things that I would probably say, well, two different things here in my mind that come up that we probably won't have as much as we move through the system. But one of the things is Cache Valley virus. Is that sometimes has happened. That's a vector of a mosquito. And sometimes those animals will come out with a little bit more deformed limbs of both front and rear limbs. And it can be a challenge, particularly if there's multiple births inside of them and you feel lots of different legs going in lots of different ways. But it is something that can and could and should be managed. The other thing is that even when you talked about like managing for chlamydia or just trying to make sure that we're good from an animal health standpoint, is that if you do have abortions or a group of abortions, Dan, is that in my personal opinion, that's something that you certainly hope that doesn't happen, but it's something that you want to get ahead of as quickly as you can if you do have something, because that causes depression in your own world and changes in terms of meeting your goals, no doubt. But it's not fun from that standpoint. And so if something happens, what I suggest is that you keep those lambs or the ones that have perished. Again, I don't get to vote to see if they go into people's freezers, but you can, or at least try to keep the placenta as well, the afterbirth. Because if it happens again, you're going to want to make sure that you do something and talk to a veterinary diagnostic lab that's in your area so that you can get it figured out. Because just because that happens from abortive diseases is that it's tricky to know what they are or what caused it. And so that would be my last thing. And in fact, as we look at so much of the shiny things that have happened with the polypay operation here at Rafter P Ranch, is that so many of the times things look like they're going well, but it just takes a small turn, and then some things can happen from that standpoint as well. So just be prepared from that approach. We got to show you the lambing kit, the things that we use here at Dan and Kay's operation, and I guess closed it up there with just some health and some feed recommendations. Do you see some that you want?
There's a question on the
questions.
Chat. One, do you know a mix like that for goats, TMR mix? Well, the TMR mix is not something you go and buy at a feed store. That is all ingredients we have here on the farm. So it's ground hay, it's corn silage, it's things we mix here for that total mixed ration. And then do I ever run into any listeriosis in feeding fermented TMR? I rarely will have a listeriosis problem, and I believe most of my listeriosis actually comes from the bottoms of round bales that were sitting on the ground, and we're bad at it too. We try to not grind the bottom of those bales into the TMR, but sometimes it happens. But we have very little problem with listeriosis. I think a bigger issue is some of the yeasts and molds. If you don't manage your silage and haylage properly and get yeasts and molds growing in them, that's a bigger concern to me than listeriosis. I can treat listeriosis. I can't treat molds and yeasts. I think we covered the chat.
Yeah. Brenda, do you have any last questions for our team?
I think you guys did an excellent job. I thought this was super interesting and informative, and just judging by some of the comments from our viewers tonight, they feel the same way too. So we really appreciate you, Dan and Kay, and all of our team members here on tonight helping out, for letting us come to your farm. And Travis, I'll let you wrap it up.
Great, thanks. Again, appreciate everybody for joining us from a balmy February in Minnesota. Now that we've made it past a little bit of a brisk streak. But one of the things is that you realize is that if I was to sum this up, is that it takes a tremendous amount of passion. If that's okay, Dan and Kay, to enjoy what you're doing. There you compassion. Oh, passionate. Yeah. But it takes a couple things. Obviously, the knowledge to be able to make it happen, but the care and the want to as well, from a welfare and a stewardship of animal standpoint. And so nothing gets me more excited, and those probably in the agricultural industry, is when that you get to help and be a part of creating births in the next generation of animals. And so hopefully those that are within our industry find that fulfilling. And that's why we have lots of people that want to know about what to do on lambing, because it is an exciting time, and it is an opportunity that we can make a positive impact for the animals. And it's the reason why people either chose it for the hobby or the boutique portion of their operation, or if they chose it for their lifestyle and their way of life. So appreciate everybody. Appreciate Brock for helping us out and joining us from Dan and Kay Persons. This has been helped with from the Minnesota Lamb and Wool Producers Association, also our North Dakota State University Extension, where we are extending knowledge and changing lives, and the University of Minnesota, where we are driven to discover. So hopefully you have a great evening, and appreciate everyone joining us. Signing off from Kensington, Minnesota.
Home of the runestone.
There you go.
Yes.
Enjoy your evening.
Thank you for joining us, everybody.